Hey everybody, welcome to week 8 of Music 103 for the fall of 2020. This week we're going to have probably 2 videos on triads and triad construction. This first video that you're watching now is kind of the basics of what is a triad and how do you build them. So previously we talked about intervals and how intervals sometimes can be dissonant and sometimes be consonant. The most consonant intervals that we have include the octave, the perfect fifth, thirds, sixths, and sometimes fourths. These intervals are consonant because they have a simple whole number ratios between the 2 frequencies. They're also considered consonant because they can be used to build triads. Any combination of pitches can be considered a chord. But to make a triad, which is a specific kind of chord, you have to follow a particular pattern. On the screen, you see a chord with the bottom note labeled root. A third above that is another note, and a third above that note is the final note in this triad, which is a fifth above the bottom note. All triads are made of 3 pitches in a stack of 2/3, with a fifth as the interval on the outside between the lowest and highest note. The configuration you see here looks kind of like a snowman, or maybe a stack of pancakes. These notes are in what's called simple closed position. That means this triad has been constructed so that all of my pitches are as close together as they can be. However, let's say that I wanted a chord with a bit more heft to it than just this. What I would do is come down here on the piano and add more of the same notes. I would double them in different octaves. So I have 2 C's, another C up here, more E's, more G's, etc. Doing this doesn't change which parts of the chord are what. In other words, C is still the root, E is still the third, and G is still the fifth of my chord, regardless of how I spread them out through this chord. If you look at the bottom, you'll see that there's a C with a G right above it. That doesn't change the fact that the G is still the fifth of the chord, and you see that on the top of this chord we now have E. E is still the third of my chord, even though it's now on top as well as in the stack of this chord. So just like intervals have different qualities, triads also have different qualities, meaning they sound slightly different depending on exactly what kind of thirds and fifths go into them. Take the triad that's third from the left on this screen. It's a G, a B, and a D. From G to B is a major third, as we know, because B is in my key of G major. And from G to D is a perfect fifth, because D is also in my key of G major. This is a major triad. The major third between the root and the third makes it sound that way. Just to its left, you'll see G, B flat, and D. It's still a perfect fifth on the outside, but now the distance from my root to my third is a half step smaller. And it's like my lowered third in a minor scale. This is a minor triad, so you can think of it as the third of your triad is like a toggle between major and minor. If it's the larger third, a major third, it's a major triad. If it's the smaller third, it's a minor triad. Look at the triad furthest to the left. The triad furthest to the left is a G, a B flat, and a D flat now. The size of this fifth on the outside is now half a step smaller than perfect, which means it must be diminished. So this is a diminished triad because it's a minor third plus a minor third. It has a very distinct sound, not at all like a major triad. If you go to the 4th triad from the left, you'll see that it's G, B natural, and D sharp. That's also a distinctive sound. This is a major third plus another major third. And the fifth on the outside is now half a step too large to be perfect, so this is an augmented triad. So you can think of the third as a toggle between major and minor triads, and you can think of the fifth as a toggle on top of that between diminished, major, minor, and augmented. You could also kind of learn them by visualizing how big the thirds are in each one, from 2 minor thirds to a minor and a major, to a major and a minor, to a major and a major. And then on the right, I included 2 more triads, which are kind of weird. The second from the right is a G, B, and D flat. This isn't a traditional triad, and you're not going to find it in a diatonic scale. Jazz musicians might call this an alt chord, which is a shorthand way of saying something has been done to change the fifth, either raising it or lowering it. And the last chord on this slide, furthest to the right, is G, B flat, and D sharp. Well, just like you wouldn't expect to find both flats and sharps in the same scale, you wouldn't expect to find both flats and sharps in the same triad. If you respell the D sharp as E flat, suddenly it makes a whole lot more sense. What you're hearing is this triad, which is G, B flat, and E flat. And imagine if this E flat were moved from the top to the bottom. This would sure look like a pancake stack snowman of notes. So this is really an E flat triad that needs to be respelled, and it's currently in an inversion. Now we'll talk about triad inversions in the next video. So there's multiple ways to indicate triads. One is to write them out fully on a staff. Another that you might see on a chart for a popular music song or a jazz lead sheet would be a chord symbol. A chord symbol gives you the name of the root of a triad and then information about how to build that triad. So for example, where you see just a capital letter, that's a major triad built on that pitch. So if I see a G, it's a G, a B above that, and a D above that. If I see a G with a lowercase m, that means a minor triad, G, B flat, D. G diminished, or G with a little circle next to it, means a diminished triad, G, B flat, D flat. And a G with a plus sign next to it would be an augmented triad. The chord symbols tell me how to construct a basic version of each triad. They don't give me a lot of information as to how I should spread them out on the piano or voice them. So I could choose to do a G chord this way, or this way, or this way, this way, or this way. I do know one thing, which is that if I don't have anything other than just the symbol G, I should make G the lowest note that I play. Another way to talk about triads is to refer to their function in the scale. These colorful words probably look familiar because they're the same words that we use to describe scale degrees. The same names apply to the triads built on these scale degrees. Tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, leading tone, tonic. You can expect these triads to have a similar kind of job to the scale degree that they're built on. For example, the leading tone chord is designed in a lot of ways to point back toward the tonic triad. Also notice that all of these triads are labeled underneath with Roman numerals, like you might see on an old-fashioned clock. If you're paying close attention, you probably notice that whether the Roman numeral is uppercase, lowercase, or lowercase with a little circle next to it, seems to be connected to the quality of that triad. If you count them up, you'll see that there are 3 major triads in my diatonic major scale. 1, 4, and 5. If these chords seem familiar to you, it's because many songs use 1, 4, and 5 to a large extent. You'll see that there are also 3 lowercase Roman numerals for 2, 3, and 6. The lowercase means that these are all minor triads. And then finally, our lone diminished triad has the little circle next to it showing that it's diminished, which is also true for the chord symbol version. Similar to Roman numerals is something called the Nashville system. The Nashville system was invented by studio musicians working in Nashville who had to play lots and lots of gigs in lots of different keys. It's basically the same thing as the Roman numeral system, except it uses Arabic numerals and simplifies things a bit. With somebody who used the Nashville system, they might call out chords specifically like the idea being you would know what number meant what chord in every key. So that's an important thing to understand here. Roman numerals refer to function. They mean go to this scale degree in the scale and build a chord. And it will always be built like this because that's how the scale works. So the reverse of that means that the same triad will have 2 different Roman numerals in 2 different keys because it does 2 different jobs and it would be built on 2 different scale degrees. So take this chord that you see here, B flat, D, and F. In my key of B flat major, I would call that a 1 chord because it's built on my first scale degree of B flat. If I were in the key of E flat though, Then I would label it with a big Roman numeral 5 because it would be built on my 5th scale degree, my dominant, and it would have a very different job in that key. So chord symbols are the other way around. A chord symbol will always mean the same triad regardless of what key you're in. So look at these bottom triads. I have a D, which means a D major triad. D, F sharp, and A. If I change to some completely different key, like A flat, it doesn't matter because the chord symbol D is just telling me to build that same chord, even if I have to use a bunch of accidentals to make it come out properly. So to sum up what we've been talking about so far, Roman numerals are intended for music analysis, and they talk about function within a piece of music. A Roman numeral doesn't tell you anything about what notes are actually there aside from in the context of that key that you see on the page. Chord symbols are just the reverse. They tell you how to build that chord. They don't care what key you're in or what job that chord does. They're just telling you how to make it. And once again, triads have 3 parts, starting with the root, which is how I identify the triad. So if I say F chord, I mean that the root is F. Then there's a third, which you can think of as a toggle between major and minor. And there's a fifth, which you can think of as a toggle between augmented, or major and minor, or diminished. I'm working on compiling a short list of songs that begin with tonic triads in root position, preferably ascending ones. It's actually kind of tricky to do. I'm having trouble coming up with any really interesting or up-to-date selections, but I'm going to go ahead and put these in a playlist for the week. So that's part 1, a very basic introduction to how you build triads, and also how you might see them written on paper or studied with Roman numerals. So look for a follow-up video that will talk more about what we do with triads, including inversions and turning them to 7th chords, and that'll be coming soon. And I'll see you guys later this week.